Well, good afternoon. My name is Henry Fairchild. I was born here in Brownhelm in 1838. I saw you talking to my Aunt Catherine, so I'm sure she told you about my grandfather Grandison and my Uncle James. Yes? Yeah, good. She loves to talk about them. I love to talk about myself, so we can skip a lot. So her oldest brother, my father, unlike my three uncles that were college presidents, my father was a farmer. So his spread of land was actually just about 3/4 of a mile up North Ridge, just right over in that direction. So I spent my childhood farming his land, but I was the right age that, like many men in the town, when the Civil War started in 1861, I was caught up in the war. I enlisted in Company C of the 7th Ohio, which was raised primarily in Oberlin, about 10 miles away from here. There were 1,000 men in the regiment in 1861. There were 100 men in my company. The first time I saw the elephant, which is what we used to say being in battle for the first time, was a place called Kernstown, early in 1862. And that's one of the very few battles that Stonewall Jackson lost during the Civil War. Our first big battle was in August of 1862 at a place called Cedar Mountain. And that was the worst day of the entire war for the 7th Ohio. We lost 60% of the regiment in one afternoon at Cedar Mountain. I was wounded slightly, but I stayed with the regiment. It was not bad enough to send me home. A place called Port Republic, we started to get a reputation as one of the hardest fighting regiments in the Army. We found ourselves in a field of tall wheat, so tall that we could not see out of it, but the Confederates could not see into it. And so our commander, Colonel Creighton, had us fire a volley from one end of the wheat field, run all the way down to the other end of the field, fire a volley down there, run all the way back, fire another volley here, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But the smoke coming out of the field made it look like there were a lot more Union soldiers in that field than there really were. Our Colonel Creighton was a very clever man. Unfortunately, he did not survive the war. Now, our next biggest battle was Antietam in September of 1862. We advanced further than any Union regiment on the field at the Battle of Antietam. But my corps, the 12th, we suffered such heavy losses that after Antietam, we were pulled out of the Army and given a chance to recuperate. So we missed the Battle of Fredericksburg, which was a terrible Union defeat. We were not upset about that. We got back to the Army just in time for Chancellorsville in May of 1863, which was another Union defeat. There were a bunch of those if you keep track of them. But the 7th was one of 3 regiments that was chosen to act as a rear guard. So as the entire Army of the Potomac retreated, we stood behind to keep the Confederates back long enough for the Army to get away. Then came Gettysburg in July, and that's where my luck ran out. So the 7th was not engaged on the first day of the battle. On the second day, we were put in line at a place called Culp's Hill, which is all the way on the right side of the line. Late on the afternoon of the 2nd, we got orders to go all the way to the left side of the line to assist in the battle going on down there, but we got lost. So we marched almost all the way into Maryland before somebody realized the mistake and turned us around. We marched all night to get back to Gettysburg, got back to Culp's Hill on the morning of July 3rd, and found that the Confederates had occupied our position. So we spent all day July 3rd pushing the Confederates off Culp's Hill and then keeping them off Culp's Hill for the rest of the day. There were 51,000 casualties at the Battle of Gettysburg, and I was not one of them. I got through the entire battle without a scratch. But on the night of July 3rd, I finally went to bed after being up all night the night before and fighting all day. And I have no memory of what happened next. This is what my comrades told me later. Sometime during the night, while I was sleeping on Culp's Hill, a 20-pound cannonball fired from Lord knows where hit me in the side of the back. It did not kill me. Hit me a glancing blow, fractured my skull, knocked me unconscious for 8 days. I spent the next year in a hospital in Cleveland recovering from my injury. I did not get back to the 7th Ohio until October of 1864, so more than a year after I had been wounded, I finally got back to my regiment. I got back just as they were being discharged because our 3-year enlistment was up. There were 1,000 of us in 1861. There were 195 of us left in 1864. I was one of only 14 men left in Company C. But I decided to stay, so I re-enlisted in the Army and transferred to the 5th Ohio and spent the rest of the war in the 5th under General Sherman down south. I participated in the March to the Sea, helped to capture Savannah, and then turned north and went through the Carolinas before the war ended. After the war ended, I was one of the men that got to participate in the Grand Review of the Armies, which was 160,000 Union soldiers marching down the streets of Washington in a victory parade. There were so many of us it took 2 days to get through the city. That was one of the proudest moments of my life. After the march, I was finally discharged, and I got back to Brownhelm in October of 1865, almost exactly 4 years to the day after I left. I married my wife Emma in 1866, and I lived the rest of my life in peace. And we raised 4 sons, and I spent the rest of my life farming what became my land after my father died, raising my family, and participating in reunions of the 7th Ohio. The 7th had a reunion every year from 1866 to 1910, and I participated in every one of them until my death in 1893 at the age of 55. So thank you very much for coming today. If you have questions about anything, I'll do my best to answer them. I suggest you take a look at my stone, which is one of the nicest ones here in the cemetery. I've had 125 years to look at it, so I might be biased. Please take a look, and again, thank you for coming today.